Good evening all and welcome back to Paranormal Week. It's day 5 and I have some haunted woods horror stories for you. I also have the pleasure of being joined by Hong Kong Horror, an absolutely phenomenal YouTube channel. And if you would like to hear even more from him, follow the link down below or at the end to hear more. But for now it's time to get comfortable and let the darkness take control. I grew up in northern Michigan, on large properties surrounded by forest and logging land. My friends and I spent most of our childhood exploring them. We would climb trees, follow deer paths, and wandered for hours. Unfortunately, run-ins with creepy old men deep in the woods happened more often than you'd think. But this one stands out because I still cannot tell if he was actually a person or a ghost. Let me elaborate. Near one of the houses where I grew up in, there was an old abandoned cabin. It was falling apart, with broken windows and a sagging roof, and the boards were completely rotted out. None of us ever went close to it because something about it felt deeply wrong, even in daylight. It genuinely scared us. The barrier between my family's property and the cabin was a huge thicket of wild raspberry bushes, dense and overgrown, so we never tried going over there anyway. So one afternoon, my friend and I found a treehouse on the edge of the woods. It was further back behind what would have been the abandoned cabin's backyard. While we were checking it out, we thought we saw movement near the back door of the abandoned cabin. We got spooked and left. A week or so later, we were further up in the woods on my family's land. It was east of the abandoned cabin, and we were climbing trees again, and each of us had picked our own tree. We were not very high up, but high enough that if someone walked by, they would not directly see us in their line of sight. We heard branches breaking, and immediately stopped talking. An old man stepped into view. He was walking towards us from the direction of the abandoned cabin, and wearing a cowboy-style hat that looked worn down from years of use. His flannel shirt was faded, and his jeans looked old. "Hello, boys." I was mortified. How did he see us in these trees? Maybe we weren't as high up as we thought. Had he been spying on us? I knew not to talk to strangers, and I could not make any sense of why he was coming from that direction. I looked at my friend. He was older and braver than me and said hello back. "I want you two to be careful in these woods," he said. "I've been running around a long time and wouldn't want you both to be hurt." Then he turned and walked away. He headed back towards the abandoned cabin and vanished into the trees. My friend and I were petrified. We did not move or speak until we were sure he was gone. When we finally decided to move, we jumped out of the trees and ran back to my house. For weeks after that, we watched the cabin from the edge of my family's property. We used binoculars and waited to see any sign of him, but we never saw anyone. There were no lights, no movement of any kind, and honestly nothing that would suggest a person was living there. To this day, I still don't know if he was a real person or something else entirely, but after that day we stayed closer to home. Whenever the woods felt strange, or we sensed we had gone too far, we turned back without asking any questions. And I always thought of that old man and his warning. What I'm about to share is a true incident that happened to me back in 2016. I was 19 at the time and had just started university in Worcester, UK. Even now, I still don't really know what I saw, but what I can tell you is that it scared me badly, and I still get nightmares about it. I was visiting a place called Malvern, a small town on the edge of Worcestershire. It's about a 25 to 30 minute drive from where I was living, and it's known for its big hills and fresh spring water. It's a nice place for a walk, normally. 5 of my friends came with me. Our plan was to watch the sunset from the top of the beacon, which is the highest point. At first, everything was normal. We stopped at a pub on the way. I think it was called the Chase Inn, and we ended up talking to this older guy, and he told us a story about a student who supposedly got cursed for going up the hills on Halloween years ago. Truth be told, I wasn't really paying attention because I was demolishing my chips, but I do remember him warning us to watch out for the evil things on the hill. Looking back now, perhaps I should have listened. But all the same, we carried on, and about halfway up we realized we'd completely misjudged the time. The sun was already setting, so we rushed up the path. On the way, my friend Lewis tripped and rolled his ankle pretty badly. We stopped and got him to a bench about 50 meters up, and he told the rest of the group to go on without him, but I stayed behind with him, while the other 4 carried on to the top. At this point, nothing weird happened at all, but after a while, we realized the others had been gone for more than 2 hours and it was already dark. Lewis said he could manage to walk, so we decided to go up the rest of the way to find them. When we got to the beacon, the top was completely empty. There was not a single person. We tried calling our friends, but of course, there was no signal. So we started heading down the other side of the hill, thinking they must have gone down that way. Surely we would have seen them if they'd come down the same path as us. About 5 minutes down that side, the atmosphere changed completely. It got darker, quieter, and honestly just felt wrong. The only sound was the crunch of rocks under our feet. The forest on that side was really dense, so our phone torches were the only light we had. We kept walking, but I was terrified. It genuinely felt like a scene from a horror film, like someone was about to burst out the trees with an axe. Eventually, we reached a point where the path split. There was still no sound at all. And then we saw behind a tree this tall, thin, white-looking thing with long arms, long fingers, and long legs. The body was unnaturally skinny, and the worst part was that it had no head, nothing where a head should be. We just froze. It stepped out slightly from behind the tree, and that's when this most hideous smell hit us. This stench like vomit with rotten eggs. As soon as we smelled it, it was like we snapped out of shock. We just ran. I didn't even think, we just sprinted down the path, and when we glanced back it was standing there, facing the direction we were running. Somehow, despite Lewis's ankle, which we later found out actually was fractured, he managed to run all the way to the station with me. We got back to the university hall safe, but extremely shaken up. Our other friends swear they didn't see anything up there. I still don't know if it was something real, a shadow, a trick of the light, or something else. A small part of me wonders if that old man knew something. I honestly hope it was just my brain playing tricks on me, because it has genuinely scarred me. This story is from my very religious grandmother, and has since become somewhat of a legend in our family at this point. Decades ago, she and my grandfather were living in the woods of Northern California on a secluded ranch house. It was isolated, surrounded by dense forest, and they were far from anyone else. Well, one particular night, she was awoken suddenly by my grandfather, who was muttering something under his breath. He wasn't sleeping. He was seated upright in bed next to her, staring ahead unwaveringly, his eyes fixed on something she could not see. "I rebuke you in the name of Jesus," were the words he was steadily repeating. She turned from his face and looked towards who he was speaking to, and to her shock, she saw a thick green cloud of smoke hovering just beyond the foot of her bed. It wasn't like an airy mist or normal fog. It was condensed and undulating like a storm cloud. It moved slowly, pulsating, and the color was this unnatural green that disturbed her. Obviously startled by this sight, she expected my grandfather to react, but he said calmly, "It's okay, dear, I'm taking care of it, go back to sleep." And as far as she recalls, the cloud gradually did dissipate. It didn't vanish suddenly or explode away, but just faded, like smoke being pulled into the air. They both eventually slept soundly for the rest of the night, despite the disturbance, and nothing else happened, and the room was once again quiet. What I always found fascinating about this story, despite my grandparents' religion, is that my grandmother always said that neither of them were afraid. They didn't even necessarily feel like it was a dream. It was like something in between. Neither of them could quite explain how it felt, but both of them experienced it and remembered it vividly until their passing. They never doubted what happened or questioned it. It was just something that happened when they were living out in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by forest. I still to this day have absolutely no clue what the hell that could have been. I guess it will just be one more mystery lost to the deep woods. I grew up on a ranch deep in the forests of northern Montana, and one night when I was 7, something under my bed tried to take my pillow. I'm 25 now, but I was actually 8 at the time. My mother and father had purchased a ranch that had a bridge going over a pond, leading into a path which went into the forest, which then led into a creek. I played in that forest and creek a lot. It is where I spent most of my days, running through the trees and skipping stones in the water. Well, one night I found myself getting into bed. My room was on the top floor of the house and had a sliding door balcony overlooking the bridge that led into the forest. I could see the dark line of trees stretching out beyond the pond, and the moonlight made everything look strange and still. I was starting to fall asleep when something from underneath my bed frame tugged at my pillow, and honestly I get goosebumps just remembering this. It was a slow tug, like something was testing whether I was awake, and then it pulled again harder. I grabbed my pillow and held onto it tightly, and that's when it began pulling with all of its strength. The force was incredible, like something far stronger than a child should be able to feel. Eventually, of course, I let go, and it let out a high-pitched giggle. I was terrified. The sound was so sharp and so wrong, nothing like what a human can make. I said, yes, sir, you can have my pillow," because honestly I didn't know what else to do. The silence that followed was agonizing. I was frozen in fear, too scared to even run for the door. I was too scared to cry. I think I must have fainted because I woke up with the sun shining through my window. Thank God. But there was still no pillow under my head, so I know what happened was real. I jumped out of bed and went straight to the floor to look under it. And there, directly underneath my bed, where my head would be, was my pillow. But there was a headprint in it. It was pressed down, shaped like someone had been lying there, their weight sunk into the fabric. And the print was clear too. Too clear for a pillow that had just been tugged under a bed, like someone had only just lifted their head from it. I cannot explain what that was, but it shakes me to my core. That was a long time ago, but I still remember it clearly and know damn certain that it was not my imagination. I genuinely think there was something in the forest that day, and it followed me from those woods, down the path, down the creek, and stayed with me that night. That's the only explanation I can think of, and it's been 15 years. I was on the way back to Asheville in late November, and decided to cut through Bryson City on the way there. I got through town and headed into the forest towards Maggie Valley, and almost immediately felt like I was being watched. The feeling was strong, undeniable, like something out there was paying attention to me, and I was convinced it was just my anxiety acting up, so I Started recording a voice message to my friend about it, even though I knew it wouldn't go through for a while. The roads were empty. The trees were thick on both sides, and the darkness honestly made everything feel a bit heavy. Within 30 seconds of finishing the message, a solid white humanoid slowly walked across the road from the woods and vanished up the mountain. It moved not fast, but steady, stepping out from the trees and crossing the entire road before vanishing into the forest on the other side. It was totally proportional to a human, as far as I could tell from the distance I was at. The shape was clear, and the color was just pure white. That was all I saw the rest of the drive, but I also didn't see a single car for another 45+ minutes. The road stayed empty, and the anxiety definitely didn't let up. I kept glancing at the trees and the sides of the road, wondering if I would see it again. I was just talking to a local recently and decided to share it here after he claims he saw the same thing around Asheville. He said locals call it white hair. Didn't look very hairy to me, but it wasn't like a skin and bone type thing that you could make you think it was a Wendigo either. It was solid and smooth and completely human shaped. Any thoughts? I still don't know what it was. The whole experience left me feeling unnerved, and I know it wasn't just my imagination. And now that I know someone else has seen something similar, it makes me wonder if this is something that happens more often than I thought.
Being a delivery driver in Thailand is a test of patience that few people truly understand. It isn't just about moving a box from point A to point B. It's a daily war against the suffocating humidity, the endless labyrinth of narrow roads, and the chaotic swarm of motorbikes that weave through traffic like schools of metal fish. For Artie, this was his daily life. Every day was a blur of scanning barcodes, climbing stairs in sweat-drenched uniform, and dodging stray dogs in residential alleys. It was monotonous work. It looked dull and repetitive to anyone watching from the outside. But in the middle of that repetitive work, beneath the neon glow of the 7-Eleven signs and the heavy tropical air, every now and then, he would run into something that sends chills down his spine. On that particular Tuesday, the workload was particularly brutal. It was the height of shopping season, and the back of Artit's truck was stacked high with cardboard boxes. He drove without break, skipping lunch, fueling himself only on sugary energy drinks and the cold air blasting from the truck's air conditioner. He was so busy all the way up until past 8 in the evening. The sky had long since turned a bruised purple, and the streetlights were buzzing overhead. Artit handed over what he thought was the last package to a customer in a condo on the edge of the city. As the elevator descended, he rolled his shoulders, feeling the joints pop. He was exhausted. All he wanted was a bowl of boat noodles and a long, cold shower. He walked out to the truck, the humid night air instantly sticking his shirt to his back. He opened the rear cargo door to do a final sweep, ready to head back to the depot. But his heart sank. Tucked away in the dark corner, behind a wheel well, there was one small brown package left. Artit cursed under his breath. How did I miss this? He picked it up. It felt strangely cold to the touch. He squinted at the label under the dim cargo light. The address wasn't familiar. It wasn't anywhere near his current route. It was for a district way out in the boonies, past the ring road, where the concrete jungle of Bangkok dissolved into rice paddies and forgotten canals. Did I pick up the wrong package? He muttered. He checked the time on his phone. 8:45 p.m. It was already pitch black outside now. If he drove from here to that remote address, and then all the way back to the depot to log out, and then home, he wouldn't be sleeping until well past midnight. Every fiber of his body screamed at him to just go home. He could just mark it as undeliverable or customer unavailable. He tried to convince himself with all kinds of excuses. The traffic will be bad. The customer probably isn't even awake. I can just do it first thing tomorrow morning. But then the anxiety hit. If he didn't scan it out today, his supervisor would see the timestamp. He would get docked pay, or worse, get a warning. Even if he didn't send it today, he'd have to drive all the way out there tomorrow anyway. Forget it, he thought, slamming the cargo door shut. I'll call the customer first. If they don't pick up, I have a valid excuse to go home. He climbed into the driver's seat and dialed the number printed on the label. The phone rang once, twice. Click. A woman answered. Her voice was incredibly clear. It had a flat, hollow quality to it, like she was speaking from inside an empty room. Hello? Artit said, putting on his most polite customer service voice. I'm calling from the delivery service. Is this Kunmalai? Yes, the voice replied. Kunmalai, I have a package for you. I apologize, but I'm currently quite far from your location. The traffic is heavy, and if I drive over now, it might be very late by the time I arrive. Would it be alright if I delivered it tomorrow morning instead? There was a silence on the other end, a long, heavy silence that made Artit check his screen to see if the call had dropped. Then, she spoke. Just bring it today. I will be home tonight. She interrupted, her tone devoid of any emotion. I will wait for you. The line went dead. Artit stared at the phone. A shiver crawled up his arms, which he blamed on the air conditioning. Well, looks like I have no choice, he grumbled. He mounted his phone on the dashboard, punched the coordinates into the GPS, and pulled out into traffic. Since he did not know the area at all, he was entirely dependent on the navigation app. For the first 20 minutes, it was normal driving. He navigated the highway, watching the high-rise condos and shopping malls drift past. But as he took the exit ramp toward the outskirts, the scenery began to change rapidly. The city lights faded behind him. The 7-Elevens and gas stations became few and far between. Soon, he was driving on a 2-lane asphalt road flanked by tall, swaying grass and dark water canals. 30 minutes in, something felt off. In front of him, it was pitch black. There were no other cars, no motorbikes, just a solitary beam of his headlights cutting through the darkness. The road surface became rougher, pitted with potholes that made the empty delivery truck rattle violently. Artit looked at the window. The streetlights here were different. These weren't the bright white LED lights in the city. They were old sodium lamps, casting a sickly dim reddish-orange glow that made the vegetation on the side of the road look like bruised flesh. A fear began to settle in his stomach. It was a primal feeling, the kind you get when you're being watched. He double-checked the navigation. The blue line stretched forward into nothingness. Keep going for 2 kilometers, the robotic voice said. So, he continued. After a while, the GPS instructed him to turn left. He slowed down. There was a crossroads, marked by a very old wooden spirit house. It looked abandoned, tilted to the side with dry, dead flower garlands hanging from it. Next to it was a weathered signboard covered in vines. He couldn't read the writing as it was extremely weathered. He turned the steering wheel, guiding the truck onto a smaller road. This road was incredibly narrow, barely wide enough for his truck. Massive banyan trees lined both sides, their aerial roots hanging down like tangled hair brushing against the roof of the truck, with scratching sounds. The reddish streetlights were even dimmer here. The shadows of the tree branches cast long distorted shapes across the road surface that looked like crawling hands. After driving through this tunnel of trees for what felt like an eternity, the trees suddenly cleared. Artit squinted. Finally, he saw what looked like a little town or village of some sorts. It was strange. It looked like an old community from 40 or 50 years ago. On both sides of the road, there were rows of traditional wooden houses raised on stilts, and a few low-rise concrete apartment blocks that looked stained with black mold and age. This place is so remote, Artit whispered to himself. I didn't even know people still lived this far out. The thing that bothered him the most was the silence. Usually, in a Thai neighborhood, at night, you hear things. You hear the sound of TVs blaring soap operas, dogs barking, crickets chirping, or people laughing over drinks. Here, there was nothing. Not a single house had a light on. No TVs, no dogs, just dead, heavy silence. Maybe it's just late, he reasoned. Countryside people go to bed early. He drove slowly, his headlights sweeping over closed wooden shutters and overgrown yards. The GPS pinged. "You have arrived." He stopped the truck in front of an old 2-story apartment building. It was gray concrete, streaked with water damage. The whole building was dark. Artie took a deep breath, grabbed his flashlight and the package, and stepped out. The heat hit him instantly, thick and smelling of wet earth and rotting flowers. He walked up the external staircase to the second floor, his footsteps echoing loudly on the concrete. He found a door marked with the number on the package. He rang the doorbell. It let out a harsh mechanical buzz that seemed to vibrate through the entire silent building. He waited. No sound from the inside. He was about to ring again when the lock clicked. The door creaked open slowly. A woman stepped out. Artie blinked. She was stunningly beautiful. She wore a traditional sarong and a simple blouse. Her hair long and black, cascading down her back like spilled ink. Her skin was incredibly pale, almost glowing under the beam of his flashlight. "Hi, ma'am," Artie said. "Are you Kunmalai? This is your package." She didn't speak. She just stared at him with dark, unblinking eyes. She reached out a hand to take the box. Her fingers brushed against his, and her teeth flinched. Her skin was freezing cold, like ice. She took the package and stamped the receipt he offered her. She moved with a smooth, fluid grace that seemed unnatural. She turned around, getting ready to go back inside. Artie let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. He turned away, ready to bolt back to the truck. "Driver," the woman said behind him. Artie stopped. He froze. "When you drive back out," the woman said, her voice dropping an octave, low and raspy. "No matter who you meet, do not respond to them." Artie's blood ran cold. He forced a nervous chuckle, turning back to look at her. She was standing in the doorway with her back to him. Her body was facing into the apartment. But her head had rotated a full 180 degrees. She was looking directly at him, over her own spine. Her neck was twisted like a wrung towel, bone grinding on bone. Her face was smiling a wide, impossible smile. Artie's scalp went numb. Every hair on his body stood up. A scream trapped itself in his chest. He didn't think. He didn't breathe. He threw himself down the stairs, practically falling over his own feet. When he got to his truck, he frantically dug around his pockets, looking for his keys, when a man's voice came from behind him. "Young man, is everything all right? You look flustered." Relieved that someone else was around, Artie turned around quickly, ready to explain the situation of what he saw. But what he saw made him even more terrified. Standing right behind him was what looked to be an old man holding the hand of his grandson, standing there. But the terrifying part was that neither of them had a face. They looked human in every single way, except the face. There was just nothing. Artie screamed and finally found his keys. He scrambled back into the truck, slammed his door, and locked it. His hands were shaking so badly, he dropped the keys. Come on. The old man and his grandson walked closer to Artie and stood right next to the driver's side window and just stood there, faceless, as if staring at him. If they had eyes. Artie continued screaming as he finally found his keys and jammed it into the ignition. The engine roared to life. He floored the accelerator, tires screeching on the loose gravel as he spun the truck around. He sped back toward the tree-lined road. He checked the rearview mirror. The building was now gone, swallowed by the dark. But as he entered the tunnel of the banyan trees, the scene changed. The road was no longer empty. Under the dim reddish light of the sodium lamps, he saw figures, hundreds of them. They were standing on the side of the road, just at the edge of the tall grass. Elderly people in tattered clothes, young men with blood-soaked shirts, children holding hands. They were all swaying slightly, like trees in a wind. But there was no wind. Some looked human, while some, similar to the old man and his grandson, had no face. As the truck sped past, their heads snapped toward him. Snap, snap, snap. All of them watching him, staring at him, as if he didn't belong there. Artit couldn't stop screaming as he gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. Don't look, don't respond, he chanted to himself, remembering the woman's warning. A figure lunged from the darkness, a man with half a face missing, reaching for the door handle. Artit swerved, nearly putting his truck in a ditch. He saw the intersection ahead, the old spirit house where he first turned in. The main road was closed now. The traffic light at the crossroads was red. He didn't care, he just wanted out. He slammed the gas pedal to the floor. The truck engine screamed. He blew through the red light, turning right onto the main highway without stopping. A massive horn blasted right behind him. Bright headlights flooded his cab. A 10-wheeler truck swerved to avoid him, missing his rear bumper by inches. Artit didn't stop. He was hyperventilating, tears streaming down his face. He kept his foot heavy on the gas. Blue and red lights flashed in his mirrors. A siren wailed. A police cruiser pulled up alongside him, the officer gesturing angrily for him to pull over. Artit drifted to the shoulder, the adrenaline finally crashing. He put the truck in park and rested his forehead on the steering wheel, sobbing. A flashlight rapped on his window. Artit rolled it down. 2 officers were there. Officer Nup, a young rookie with a harsh face, shouted immediately. Are you crazy? You ran a red light and almost caused a massive accident. Why were you running? Do you have drugs in there? Get out. Artit was shaking too hard to unbuckle his seatbelt. He couldn't speak. He just pointed back toward the dark road. The second officer, Sergeant Samchai, was older. He had a weathered face and wore several Buddhist amulets around his neck. He pushed the rookie aside and leaned in, shining a light on Artit's face. Hey, Samchai said softly. Calm down. You look like you've seen a ghost. Are you alright? I... Artit stammered. Let me see your license, Samchai said. Artit handed it over with trembling fingers. Samchai looked at it, then at the delivery uniform. You're working late. Still delivering? Yes, Artit choked out. I just finished my last drop. The customer, she was... Where did you go? Samchai asked, his eyes narrowing. Artit pointed a shaky finger into the darkness behind the cruiser. That small road back there, the one with the banyan trees. I went there to deliver a package to a little village. The 2 officers looked at each other. Officer Nop looked confused. The Sergeant Samchai's face went pale. The small road? Samchai asked, his voice serious. You mean that dirt track by the old spirit house? Yes, there's a village inside. Old wooden houses, apartment buildings. I delivered to a woman named Kun Malai. Silence fell over the group. The crickets in the grass seemed to sing louder. Sergeant Samchai shook his head slowly. Son, are you sure you didn't get it wrong? There aren't any houses in there. Not anymore. I was just there, Artit cried, desperate to be believed. I saw them. I saw the woman. I saw the people on the road. Officer Nup rolled his eyes. He's high, Sergeant. He's hallucinating. But Samchai ignored the rookie. He motioned for Artit to get out of the truck. Come with me. They walked a few meters back toward the intersection. Samchai raised the heavy flashlight and aimed it at the weathered signboard Artit had seen earlier, the one weathered and covered in vines. The sergeant used his baton to push the vines aside. Read that, Samchai said. Artit squinted. The paint was peeling, but the Thai script was still legible. City cemetery and crematorium grounds. Strictly no entry after sunset. Beneath the sign, an arrow pointed directly down the narrow road, that Artit had just driven out of. Artit felt the ground sway beneath him. But the apartments, the woman. That village was torn down 30 years ago, after an outbreak, Somchai said quietly. They turned the land into an extension of the graveyard. There are no houses there, son. Only graves. They took Artit to the station to file a report. Officer Nup wanted to charge him with reckless driving and drug use. Grilled Artit for an hour, convinced that he was a mule, moving drugs through the cemetery. But Artit stuck to his story. He described the woman, the cold hand, the head turning. Officer Nup threw his pen down in frustration. This is a waste of time. He's crazy. Since they found no drugs in the truck, and Artit passed the breathalyzer, they eventually had to let him go with a heavy traffic fine. As Artit was walking out of the station, clutching his ticket, Sergeant Somchai was waiting for him by the door, smoking a cigarette. The old policeman blew a cloud of smoke into the humid night air. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small object, a Buddhist amulet on a string. He pressed it into Artit's hand. "You're not the first driver to come running out of that road," Somchai said, his voice low and grave. "And you won't be the last." He looked Artit dead in the eye. Kun Malai. That was the name of the first victim during the influenza outbreak. They say she died waiting for medicine that never arrived. Somchai patted Artit on the shoulder, a heavy grounding weight. "Go home, son. Make merit at the temple tomorrow. And next time, if the GPS tells you to turn down a dark road at night, just turn it off."
This is certainly the most bizarre story, and it's definitely a hard one to believe. So after spending the whole summer at my friend Adam's village and school started, I really started missing hanging out there every day. It got to a point where I was dreaming about the village every night. Once I had a nightmare about going out at night as usual and going to the woods. There I saw a dark shadow-like figure standing next to the path which leads to the forest. It wasn't hostile, it was simply standing there. I can't explain how it looked like. It was like everything and nothing all at once. I just can't point out anything about its appearance. After I woke up, I called Adam to tell him about this. He told me he had similar dreams when he was in his village at night and saw the same thing. Of course, I didn't believe him and asked him to describe the place where he saw it. In my dream, it was next to a path at night where the branches of the bushes form a gate thing. And yeah, you can guess he said the same thing. He told me he knows where this place could be, so we did what 15-year-olds would do. We decided to look for it at night. After a few hours of wandering, we gave up. On our way back home, we took the longer path from the forest to Adam's house. Adam had one more idea where we should check, so we went there. It was around 2 a.m. when we got to the edge of the woods, and there it was, the exact same opening we saw in our dreams. Mind you, we had been here before, but we never dared to enter the forest because we started getting goosebumps and tearing up every time we wanted to go in. We laughed it off this time and headed to the entrance. We were around 30 meters away when Adam suddenly let out a faint gasp and fell to his knees. He could barely speak and was just pointing at his back. I helped him stand up and dragged him back to the road. Once he could breathe normally, he told me he felt a sharp pain in his back, like he just fell meters and landed on his back. He could barely move and was coughing after every sentence he said. Side note, the road we were on during this time crossed a field and lies next to the big forest. There are lots of bugs, birds, and even a few cows nearby, so it's noisy at night. Well, suddenly it got dead silent. I mean, no noise. As soon as we noticed this, I grabbed Adam and ran as fast as we could. We reached the first house of the village. It had motion sensors on every side, cameras, and a high fence. While running, Adam suddenly stopped and grabbed me to lie down. He said, "Man, look, what the hell is that?" The light above the fence turned on, and there it was. A thing, walking on 4 legs, with a round head and long limbs. It was moving like when a human tries walking on all 4s. So, we were lying there, and I thought to myself, it must be a deer or a dog. We're not in a horror movie. And just as I'm about to stand up, Adam whispers, "Where did it go?" Yeah, it climbed the fence. The fence had barbed wire, and it was about 3 meters tall. Then the lights across the house. This went on for a few minutes. That thing was moving so fast, it took a few seconds for it to get to one side of the fence to the furthest one, about 200 meters away. Around 5 to 6 minutes had passed when the thing just straight up appeared out of nowhere. We could catch one last glimpse of it hurtling itself towards the forest and then vanishing once more. We got up and didn't stop until we got home. We locked the doors, grabbed everything that could be used for self-defense, and didn't go to sleep until sunrise. There was another guy in the village who saw this thing too, but he's famous for drinking and getting high, so no one will believe him. The dreams, the forest, and the unexplained pain in Adam's back, and the thing together is just too much to process. I really can't say anything else. This is what happened, and that's it. If anyone has seen anything similar, I'd love to hear your account. My friend and I used to walk through the woods behind my house almost every day, especially during the summer, when baseball season was going on. The field was accessible through those woods, so we could get in for free. It was just our routine. The woods were familiar to us. Well, one day on the way to the field, we got through the thick part of the woods and into a clearing. It was a space we had seen before, but there was something different this time. There, on a fallen log, we saw a squirrel that had been dissected. It had been cut cleanly down the middle, with its intestines deliberately spread out and pinned to the log with little sticks, almost like someone had arranged it on purpose in a Vitruvian man pose. The way it was set up was precise and looked honestly ritualistic. We stood there for a moment, staring at it in fear, trying to understand what we were looking at. Neither of us said anything, and then without a word we ran home crying. We did not go back into those woods for years after that. Our neighborhood was small and isolated and mostly full of old people, so we were basically the only 2 kids who lived there. We spent so much time in those woods, playing there every day, that I still wonder whether whatever did that to the squirrel saw us, and we just never noticed. I don't know, that thought kept coming back to me. But what makes it feel paranormal to me is that people in that area reported other strange things too. Someone found animal remains that looked like sacrifices or messages, like a friend from school who once found a skinned deer head placed in the middle of his backyard. Others saw runes carved into trees or scattered in the ground. There were even some stories about strange groups of people dancing and moving around in those woods at all hours of the day, and people who did not belong in that area skulking through places that were supposed to be uninhabitable. The combination of all of these things made me feel like there was something paranormal taking place. My grandfather grew up in Puerto Rico and said he had a golden rule, which was to never go into the woods after sundown. He said it often, but never explained why, and at the time I just assumed it was a rural superstition. I grew up in Fajardo, a beach town on the eastern side of Puerto Rico. I lived with my dad growing up, but my grandparents were our next-door neighbors, so as you can imagine I spent a considerable amount of time at their house whenever my dad was working. That meant my grandfather was almost always around every day of my life. He wasn't the kind of man you'd expect to believe in anything supernatural. When he was younger, he had been around 6'3", though by the time I knew him, age had pretty much brought him closer to just 6 feet. But he was still very big, broad-shouldered and imposing. He had served in the US Army for about a decade, starting in the late 1940s, and after leaving the service he worked several jobs before eventually opening a small bodega in New York during the 1970s. Later, he moved back to Puerto Rico. He was not a superstitious man. Every evening, he would sit on the balcony in a long blue and white hospital chair he had because of circulation problems with his legs. From there, he could see the street and the houses across from us. The woods were behind the houses and out of view. And almost every day he would repeat the following like a mantra: "Don't go into the woods after sundown." Well, one evening when I was 14, one of my best friends had come over. The sun was already dipping behind the hills, and the sky had that beautiful orange color to it that tells you that night will be here soon. My friend said he wanted to go explore, which of course meant the woods, and normally I would have asked my grandfather if it was okay. But at the time I didn't, because I knew what he'd say. So instead I just told him we were going for a walk. As soon as we were leaving through the gate, he called me from the balcony. "Don't go into the woods after sundown." I hadn't said anything about the woods, though. For a moment I wondered if he knew, and I said we wouldn't, but the warning stayed in the back of my mind, and of course we went into the woods anyway. At first everything was normal. We followed one of the trails we had walked plenty of times before. The cocky frogs were chirping, and the trees moved gently in the breeze. Eventually the light faded, until moonlight was the only thing lighting the way. After a while, my friend said he needed to take a leak, so he stepped off the trail and walked a little deeper behind the trees, and I waited. A minute passed, and then two, and then I started to feel quite uncomfortable in the woods, so I stepped off the trail and went looking for him. Instead of finding him, I walked straight into a clearing. At first, I thought I recognized it. There had been a small open spot in the woods where one of the neighbors had thrown a party once when I was younger. But this clearing, I don't think it was it. If it was, something about it felt weird. I then realized the one I remembered was small, maybe 20 feet across at most. However, this one was much larger. The tree line stretched further out than I remembered, forming a wide circle around me. For a moment I wondered if I had somehow walked into a completely different place, but I didn't remember there being any other clearings nearby, and standing in the middle of it was a figure. At first I thought it was my friend, so I called his name but received no reply. I walked further out of the trees thinking maybe he just couldn't hear me. By the time I realized something was wrong, I was already deep into the clearing. The figure slowly turned around. This was not my friend. It was an old woman. From the edge of the clearing she had looked tall, but up close I could see she was actually small and frail. Her expression was something I still struggle to describe. The best way I can explain it is that she looked furious, almost possessed. We stared at each other, then she lifted her hands. They moved too quickly and sharply for someone that old, almost like her body didn't match her movements, and began murmuring, I couldn't understand what. At the same time, the wind suddenly picked up around the clearing. Then the temperature dropped, and anyone who's ever been to Puerto Rico knows how strange that is. But suddenly the cold hit my chest when I breathed. The wind got stronger, and the entire time she kept moving her hands in the air. I shut my eyes and braced myself for something to happen, but after a few seconds, everything stopped. The wind suddenly died, it was no longer cold, and when I opened my eyes, the clearing was now empty. It took almost an hour before my friend and I finally found each other again. According to him, he had never moved spots from where he had stepped off the trail. He said 1 minute I was standing there and the next I wasn't. We walked out of the woods quickly, but the entire time it felt like something was watching us from between the trees. and the moment we stepped out to the light of the streetlights, that feeling was gone. When I got home, my grandfather was still on the balcony. At first he looked angry that I had stayed out so late, but the moment he saw my face, his expression changed. I told him everything. When I finished, he slowly turned and looked towards the dark line of houses that stood between us and the woods. For the first time in my life, the big tough man looked pale, and finally he just said one word: Brujas, witches. He immediately went inside and began closing the windows and locking the doors. This was not usual practice for him. Before I left for my house next door, I looked through the doorway. My grandfather was sitting alone in the living room, and for the first time in a long time I saw him praying the rosary. After that night we never talked about what happened in the woods, and he stopped saying the mantra to me. I guess he knew that I'd now learnt the lesson for myself. My friend and I were driving through the woods at night, listening to music, when we noticed a car parked on the side of the road. It wasn't running, the engine was off, but there was something on the driver's side that caught our attention. At first, it looked like a white headrest cover or something similar, just something that didn't belong and stuck out against the dark interior of the car. My friend who was driving suddenly sped up away from the car, terrified. His hands tightened on the wheel and he wouldn't look back. He said it looked like a face under a white cloth, and he could see some facial features underneath it. The shape was defined and looked humanish, but not completely. There were eyes, maybe a nose, and the outline of something that looked like a mouth. We laughed it off for a minute, trying to calm ourselves, thinking perhaps he was just imagining things, that the darkness and the music were in fact taking control. After a little while, we decided to turn back and take a better look at it. We needed to see what it really was. It was still there, parked exactly where we left it. Now I could see the face too, though not as clearly as my friend had. The white cloth was there, but underneath it, something human-shaped. My friend sped up again and was even more terrified. He saw it now, for sure, a face. There wasn't just a cloth on top of the face. It was wrapped around the head tightly, like something had been done deliberately, like someone had bound it themselves. He could see the face had its mouth fully open under the fabric, like someone screaming or gasping for air trapped under the wrappings. We drove off and tried to come up with explanations, but it still creeps us out. My first thought was that someone was having a migraine and trying to relieve it, but it seems odd to wrap your whole head up like that. We went back a few days later and it was gone. The car was still there, but whatever was in the driver's seat was missing. And no, we didn't call anyone. We're located in Finland and this was on a bus route. There were multiple cars driving past us, so even though it's the woods, it's a busy road. Someone would have seen it if it was real. Someone would have stopped. Someone would have done something. I still don't know what was actually happening, but there's nothing there anymore. Whatever it was, it vanished. And I think that's the part that still bothers me the most. Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so much for listening. I hope you have enjoyed tonight's stories. If of course you did, you can let me know down below. And I would like to give an extra special thank you to Hong Kong Horror for his contribution to tonight's video. If you enjoyed his work, you can find a link down below and on the end cards shortly to hear more from him. But that is it from me. I'd like to give one final thanks as always to my amazing members and patrons whose names are flashing on the credits now. And if you would like to join their ranks, get some exclusive perks, follow the info down below to find out more. But that's it from me, and I will see you tomorrow for Demon Stories. Until next time, and good night.